My name is Orin Kerr. I'm a law professor at George Washington University here in Washington, D.C. My background is in mechanical engineering. I was a mechanical engineering major in college and in graduate school. And then after graduate school, I went straight to law school. My engineering background, no doubt, reflects the influence of my father, a late professor of engineering, a very distinguished engineering professor at the University of Delaware. After I gave it my best try in engineering, and then by the end of college and really by graduate school, I knew that engineering was not for me anymore. And I went to law school not really knowing very much about law. I didn't have any lawyers in the family, but a lot of people had told me, you'd make a good lawyer. And I was just very interested in the material, so I thought, okay, I've gotten into a good law school and I should go. So I went to law school, clerked for a judge for a year after law school, a Third Circuit Judge, Leonard Garth. And then I went to the Justice Department in the honors program, where I was a lawyer in the computer crime and intellectual property section in the criminal division for 3 years. So I started then teaching at George Washington University in 2001, and I've been here at GW ever since, with stints to clerk for Justice Kennedy and also 2 visiting professorships. But basically I've been teaching since 2001. My academic focus is on how technology impacts criminal law and criminal procedure. And it's really a focus that I picked up while at the Justice Department. I was in a section, the computer crime section, that was dealing with the newest technologies, how criminal law was changing, how the computer intrusion laws worked, searching and seizing computers. And I picked up this specialty really by accident. It was not a plan. I didn't think at the beginning that I was going to go into this field. In fact, I was basically hired by mistake into the section of the Justice Department that hired me. I was admitted into the honors program in the criminal division, and we then needed to pick a section. So the criminal division is divided into different substantive specialties. There's the fraud section and the public integrity section and the appellate section. And it was 1998 when I was trying to make this choice, when I'd just been hired or announced that I was being hired. And it was the middle of the internet boom, and I thought, computer crimes, that seems really exciting. It's computers, and I have a technical background. So I'd sign up for that, and I signed them up as my first choice. And it turned out they signed me up as their first choice, but they thought they were just bringing me in to interview me. They didn't realize I'd already been hired by the criminal division in the honors program. So they filled out a form, which it turned out hired me full-time. And they then spent some time over the next few months before I arrived apparently trying to unhire me. I guess that's the euphemistic phrase. And when I showed up, they told me they were pretty upset that I was there and they had not wanted to hire me. And unfortunately, it being the federal government, there was no form to fire me or unhire me. There was only a form to hire me. So they were stuck with me. So I was very lucky. It was a great accident because I arrived at the Justice Department and in the computer crime section at really an incredible time. It was just the beginning of the internet boom, and there were new issues that were arising that nobody else was seeing, and I was the 17th lawyer in the computer crime section, and they handed me a project. The boss of the computer crime section, asked me when I started, what skills do you have? And I had just come from a clerkship in law school, so the frank answer was I had no skills at all. And there was a project that no one else wanted to do, which was basically to write a treatise on the law of computer crime investigations, including how the Fourth Amendment applies to computers and all the electronic surveillance laws. And I explained to the section chief that I had no background in it. I didn't know anything about that subject, but it was my first week on the job, and I wanted to be a go-getter and impress people with. I didn't want to turn something down, so I said, sure, I'd be willing to do it. It was basically the project that nobody else in the section wanted to do. And as a result, I ended up spending a lot of the time in my first year or two at the Justice Department essentially writing a treatise on computer crime investigations, really starting from the beginning and trying to understand how the Fourth Amendment applied to computers, how electronic surveillance laws worked. And it was a tremendous experience because I learned a phenomenal amount about this area of law, which I thought while I was working on this, this is going to be pretty important. I was starting at the ground level in a field that most people hadn't heard of. Nobody really knew what the issues were, but I was there at the beginning and could sort of say, all right, I want to make this my own. So I ended up specializing in this area when I started teaching, left the Justice Department, and immediately started writing and teaching in the area of computer crime law and criminal procedure, and I've stuck with that ever since. It was surprisingly, it was a general treatise that the computer crime section put out to try to help train prosecutors and agents at the federal level and at the state level, basically to make sure that federal agents and state agents and everyone in law enforcement knew the basics of how to obtain electronic evidence. And you can think about the problem from a police officer's perspective. If you're a, Metropolitan Police Department officer, you know what the rules are with stopping a car, you know what the rules are with arresting somebody, you know the rules for searching a home or opening a package, but what are the rules for searching a computer? When do you need a warrant? What are the rules forensically for searching a computer? What about at the border, or to take an issue that the Supreme Court recently granted cert on, what about incident to arrest? Everybody's carrying a very sophisticated computer in their pockets these days, a cell phone. Can they be searched at the moment of arrest? There's a usual rule that says the government is allowed to search any property on a person at the time of arrest, but does that apply to computers? There's just all sorts of issues, really the result of a transformation in terms of the digital evidence available. So you can think of it this way, I think. We're used to the world of physical evidence, of the government looking for the gun or looking for the drugs, or trying to get eyewitness testimony from a suspect. And we're entering this world now where more and more evidence is stored in electronic form, and that evidence is just obtained in different ways. It's data stored on a server somewhere, it's a file inside someone's cell phone or inside someone's iPad or PC, and the process of obtaining that information is different, and it just triggers a new set of questions as to how should the laws apply to collecting that evidence and using that evidence in court. So those are the issues that I ended up focusing on, mostly by the happenstance of starting off at this section and being hired essentially by mistake at that particular time. It's been interesting to watch over time. When I first started in the field of, I guess, computer crime law, criminal investigations involving computers in 1998, a lot of the issues that we had were theoretical questions that might arise. And we spent a lot of time thinking about these questions. An agent would call us and say, well, what about this problem? What do we do in this situation? And it hadn't come up in a case yet. It was just really a prospective sort of inquiry. And we started to think about those issues then, and then maybe sort of think about a typical way the field has started to develop. 2001, 2002, you start to see a district court case that touched on the issue. 2005, 2006, you start seeing Court of Appeals cases that touch on the issue. And now, in the beginning of 2014, we're seeing circuit splits. We're seeing the Supreme Court start to take these cases. So the field has been evolving over the last 15 years, and today now it's recognized there are really interesting issues here, and it's clear the Supreme Court is going to have to resolve a lot of the disagreement. But at the time when I started, it was really just a bunch of hypotheticals we were asking ourselves and asking each other, and agents were asking us to try to get some idea as to what to do if that situation arose. I think the engineering background was helpful in that I knew I could understand the technology. So I thought, okay, I've got a master's degree in mechanical engineering. I should be able to figure out this basic question of computer technology. So I had some sort of confidence that I could figure it out. And when I was working with tech people in the field, or FBI agents or people with technical backgrounds, they could look at me and think, okay, I think this guy will get it eventually. But beyond that, the kind of issues that I studied in engineering in graduate school and undergraduate were really not at all the kinds of questions that arose as a lawyer. I mean, I was looking at airplane design and fluid mechanics and heat transfer questions, which are not the kind of issues that arise in the context of searching a computer. So it wasn't related technological issues, but I suspect it was helpful just to have a technology background. No, interesting. It's an interesting question, actually. Okay, here's the answer, or my answer. I think it's let's scratch that. I think it's helpful to have a technological background, with the caveat that a lot of what we think of as technology today will probably just be general knowledge in 10 or 20 years. So an example of this, I think it's always helpful to think of earlier technologies in which they raised some similar questions, and one of them in the Fourth Amendment area is the automobile. A tremendous number of Fourth Amendment cases involve searches of cars, rules on stopping cars, when can the trunk be searched, all these questions. In the turn of the century, 100 years ago, or in the 1920s, these were technology questions. And you can imagine asking a justice in the 1920s or the teens, do you need to know how an automobile works to know how the Fourth Amendment should apply to it? And obviously you didn't need to know the internal combustion engine or how transmissions worked, but you did need to know what cars did. You needed to know how fast they could go. You needed to know if they could store evidence and how, just to get a sense of to what extent does the automobile change the basic rules that had applied to houses or packages or even ships in earlier days. So that kind of understanding of what the technology does, I think that's the kind of thing that starts off as a technological question, but very quickly just becomes a societal question. And another example of this that comes to mind is how cell phones work. Most people started getting cell phones maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And initially they were just sort of magical black boxes. Just how does a cell phone work? It's just magic. It just connects you to the world. And no one really, most users didn't have a sense of that. And my sense is that over time, it's increasingly common for users of cell phones to have some rough idea as to how the technology works. There's cell towers. As a user, you turn on the phone, it connects to a cell tower, it's communicating with the cell tower. The idea that there would be records from the cell tower as to where the phone is located roughly, that seems more intuitive as you get a better understanding of how the technology works. And so I think, looked at from a historical or long-term perspective, we're at the very beginning of a computer, I don't want to use the revolution because it sounds too dramatic, but a computer change, a computer transformation in some way, in which we're relying more and more on these machines. And we're at the point now where we're just getting used to that, and we're just understanding how these new devices work. And these devices are changing constantly. So every year right now we're seeing a new iPhone, a new computer, and we expect the computer we buy today to be much, much better than the computer we bought 2 years ago. I think over time the technology is likely to stabilize in that area, and it will just become common knowledge as to how that works. So it won't be seen as a technological question. It'll just be seen as a life question. It'll just be something you know about as you go about your daily life.